Good morning. The last few years have not been easy ones for the millions of people who work in our public services. The great crash of 2008 and the years of forced austerity it ushered in made their already difficult jobs even harder as we politicians challenged them to deliver a bigger bang for the taxpayer's buck. Yet that is exactly what they've done, and at a time of pay freezes and below inflation pay rises. This is a testament to the dedication and professionalism of our doctors, nurses, teachers, police officers and all the other public sector staff who, through their hard work, have helped to turn the country around over the last few years. The decisions we've had to make to get the public finances back to good health have not been easy, but they have been the right decisions. Yes, we protected the National Health Service and the schools budget, but the growth in overall public spending has had to be restrained and in unprotected areas actually reduced. No Liberal Democrat takes any joy in making cuts to public spending, and no Liberal Democrat will allow cuts to continue for a minute longer than is necessary to clear the deficit. That's why, unlike the Conservatives, who want to continue shrinking the public sector long after the budget is back in balance, we've committed to reinvest in our core public services by allowing overall spending to rise at the same rate as the economy after 2017-18. And now I'd like to hand over to Nick, who will set out what this balanced approach to deficit reduction means for public sector pay.
Thank you, David. Thank you all for being here this morning. For the last 5 years, as David explained, we've had to make difficult choices in order to find the savings needed to bring the deficit down and turn around the economy. For workers in the public sector, in particular, this has meant years of belt tightening, pay freezes or below inflation pay rises, and in some cases, redundancies. I'm not going to pretend that that has been in any way easy. Despite being asked to make do with less, workers in the public sector have maintained the highest standards and shown great professionalism. £12 billion, to be exact. That's how much we have saved over the last Parliament through pay restraint. So first and foremost, I simply want to say thank you. Workers across the public sector have made enough sacrifices. You have done your bit to help get the country back on track. And that's why the Liberal Democrats believe it is time to end the era of pay restraint. Under our plans, we will give all public sector workers, from teachers and nurses to soldiers and police officers, pay rises that will at least keep pace with the cost of living. That means no more pay cuts for public sector workers and no more pay freezes or below inflation pay rises. It means if you are a nurse on £25,000, you will get a minimum pay rise of £350. If you're a police officer on £30,000, you will get a minimum pay rise of £420. And if you're a teacher on £35,000, you will get a minimum pay rise of nearly £500. And after 2017 and 18, when we have finished the job on the deficit, we will be able to offer more generous real terms pay rises. So if you are a public sector worker worried about conservative cuts will threaten your job, or Labour's refusal to deal with the deficit means further years of pay cuts, then only a vote for the Liberal Democrats will guarantee you a fair pay deal. For those who ask if this is affordable, we have already committed to protecting pay settlements in health and education, which accounts for more than half of public sector pay. In effect, we're saying that further savings from Whitehall will not have to involve pay. We can do that because the savings we want are half the rate of those we've already achieved this year alone. With the Liberal Democrats, there is light at the end of the tunnel. With a balanced approach over the next 2 years, including tax rises for some of the wealthiest in society, we can finish the job of balancing the books and invest again in our public services. We will do this because we care about having well-funded and well-run public services, even when times are tough. Liberal Democrats will always act in the national interest to keep Britain stable and anchor the government in the centre ground. But there is now a very real danger that the next government will not put the national interest first. I fear Britain may be sleepwalking into a dangerous future. A government that will lurch away to the extremes of left or right because Ed Miliband is held hostage by a small band of left-wing separatists on the one hand, or because David Cameron is held ransom by hard-right ideologues who will threaten our public services and our shared values on the other. The threat of a Labour-SNP alliance has been well covered, but the threat of a Conservative government held hostage by Nigel Farage and his friends on the angry right wing of the Conservative Party is just as real. After the last election, the Liberal Democrats did what was necessary at a time of crisis to fix the economy and keep the government strong, stable and fair, even though we knew we would take a hit to our popularity. We ended the broken two-party system that saw power handed back and forth between the blue team and the red team in a depressing game of pass the parcel that left you shortchanged time and time again. But I never imagined that what would follow would be the sort of threats that face us today. A Labour Party with no sense of responsibility, promising excessive and reckless borrowing and leaving themselves vulnerable to the demands of Scottish nationalists intent on breaking up our country. Or a Conservative Party acting in its callow self-interest, promising a devastating level of cuts and leaving themselves vulnerable to an angry mob of right-wingers from UKIP, the DUP and their own backbenches. Make no mistake, there is a clear and present danger that this blue-kip alliance will hold the balance of power after May the 7th. Everybody knows that neither David Cameron nor Ed Miliband will win a majority, even if they pretend otherwise. So someone else is going to have a huge influence over the direction of our country. That's why it matters who holds the balance of power on the 8th of May. It could be Nigel Farage, it could be Alex Salmond, or it could be the Liberal Democrats. Imagine what will happen if Nigel Farage and his blue-kip allies hold the balance of power, our public services cut to the bone, our communities divided, our shared British values of decency, tolerance and generosity simply cast aside. This is not some far-fetched scenario. There is a very real possibility that it could come to pass in little over 2 weeks' time. And the only way to stop it is for there to be enough Liberal Democrat MPs to keep the next government anchored in the centre ground. There are just 2 weeks left to stop the right-wing threat to Britain. So ask yourself this. Do you want Nigel Farage walking through the door of number 10? Do you want Alex Salmond sat at the cabinet table? Or do you want the Liberal Democrats? We won't allow the Conservatives to cut too much and jeopardise our schools and hospitals, and we won't allow Labour to borrow too much and risk our economy again. That is why every Liberal Democrat MP elected next month matters. Only the Liberal Democrats can make sure the next government keeps Britain on track. Every Liberal Democrat MP makes Labour's reckless borrowing less likely. Every Liberal Democrat MP makes George Osborne's ideological cuts less likely. And every Liberal Democrat MP is a barrier between Nigel Farage, Alex Salmond and the door to number 10 Downing Street. The Liberal Democrats will add a heart to a Conservative government and a brain to a Labour one. Only the Liberal Democrats will keep Britain on track and make sure our recovery is strong, stable and fair. Only the Liberal Democrats have a credible plan to finish the job of balancing the books and invest in our world-class public services. Thank you very much. Questions? Yeah, David.
David Hughes from the Press Association. You need to find, for your efforts to balance the books, £12 billion in savings. By this commitment on pay, you've ruled out one of the means by which you could have done that. Will you now give us the details of how you intend to find these savings in Whitehall budgets?
We actually need to find £27 billion to balance the books. And we have said that we will do so through a variety of measures, as you know. Just over £3 billion worth of savings from the welfare budget, some of which we have already elaborated on. Further measures on tax evasion and tax avoidance. Some tax changes which only affect the very wealthiest, which will generate several £billions worth of additional revenue. And as you say, £12 billion in a comprehensive spending round at the beginning of the next government. Now, just to put it in perspective, all we're saying is that £12 billion of savings will not rely upon further public sector pay restraint. Since we've already protected and set out our figures about how we will protect the funding for health and education, that constitutes already well over half of the public sector pay bill. So it is not quite, it's not quite as sort of unfeasible as your question implies. Secondly, it's worth bearing in mind that the £12 billion worth of departmental Whitehall savings over 2 years is half on an annualised basis than what we've saved in this very last year of this Parliament. So again, I hope that provides you with a sense of perspective that we can most definitely, in a comprehensive spending round, achieve that saving from Whitehall. Of course, I'm not going to write to you now or describe to you, no government would, no government ever has, never can't, a comprehensive spending round, because that requires a huge amount of sort of departmental work within Whitehall. But I'm absolutely confident, having generated and presided over significantly larger savings year in, year out over the last half a decade, that we can achieve those kind of Whitehall savings on half of what we've done just latterly over the next 2 years before we balance the budget. Yeah.
Emily Morgan from ITV News. Isn't it the truth that actually what you're really doing is freezing pay in real terms for 2 years, and there's no guarantee that it will go up above inflation come 2017-18, because actually what you're saying is that you're just going to make recommendations to the review body? No, so the way that works is pay review bodies, as you know, in each area of the public sector, they make recommendations to the government about what the pay settlements should be in each area of the public sector, but they do so under guidance from central government. And what we're saying is that the guidance to pay review bodies by the Liberal Democrats will, firstly, for the first 2 years, 16-17, 17-18, of the next